relates to what these thinkers were thinking about at that time. And you can fill in the rest. In any case, we're not going to come up with a very modern period, because the last thinker that we're really doing here is Vladimir Jabotinsky and Chaim Weizmann. And Jabotinsky died in 1940, before the Second World War, on the eve of the Holocaust. And Weizmann survived and became the first president of Israel. That's not a political office. That's just a ceremonial office. And then he died not long after that. So we're not going much past the 1940s. Early 1950s. Lacker will, in the history of Zionism, he would go further, obviously, and you could certainly pick that book up. And I'm not going to cover that book, which is why I'm not like forcing it on you if you don't want to have it. It's worth, as far as having a library, it's worth having in your library. And as far as reading, there are some things in it, of course, that would be useful to know and as background and so on. And we might refer to it. So we'll see, we'll hold that in limbo. The problem with those books, if you don't buy them right away, the bookstore sends them back at some point. So that's one of the issues. But as you said, with Amazon.com, you're just a snap away from finding these things. Okay, so the other reason, by the way, one last point that I've made in my other classes, is having a personal library. I can't say this is the greatest book for a personal library, the history of Zionism, but I still think that one of the things, and the ones who heard me say it earlier in my Historical Jesus class, just forget it, I'm going to say it again. You know, I go to my students' houses sometimes, and I'm astonished by the barrenness of their houses. You walk into the living room, and all there is cleanly, nicely placed furniture. But, you know, everything is bare other than that. Maybe a TV set, and maybe a few coffee table books that used to be Time Life. I don't know what they are these days. But there's no significant library. And, you know, one of the things of going to a college, to show that you've been to college, is to have books around you. And have I don't mean math books. I'm not talking about computer science or chemistry lab books. That's not going to affect anything. I'm talking about cultural books, literature, history, things of that kind, that show that you are a civilized person. And even if you're not a civilized person, people should think you are a civilized person. You went 4 years to college. And therefore, you know, I always say, if I see any of my students giving books back in the bookstore, I'll consider that I failed, that I sold you books that aren't worth having and keeping. And I hope that none of the books that you were in that other class I did, Religious Diversity, and the books we had in that class I think were worth keeping. When you say, even though you were an assistant, I think, yeah, I wouldn't give you a book if I didn't think it was worth having in your personal library. And I wouldn't recommend a book that I don't think that would be. And if you don't have a personal library, even if you're in engineering or whatever the subject, you should have. Because people should walk into your house and say, oh my God, here's an educated person. And they should be afraid of you. I mean, the 4 years at a college should actually mean something. You didn't waste time here, supposedly. And one of the accoutrements of that is that, you know, you don't have the same library a lifeguard has, or a fireman has. Not that these are dishonorable professions. They're all worthwhile professions. But yours should be more elegant, more sophisticated. As people say, even, oh my God, that person, they're well-read. Yeah, that's what they should think, even if you're not. So I do think these books are worth having, even not just this class, a lot of classes. So I don't talk to my colleagues that much, so I don't know what they assign, so I'm not going to speak for them. But I will speak for what we do in this class. So I think the history of Zionism, I think if we can use that book, if I find some use for it as we're moving along, I will use it, but I won't, since we're going to get these other two books, I don't want to force it on you in terms of your budget if it isn't, I don't know what it's selling for, but no books sell for less than $15 these days. So I imagine it must be in that price. What's the history of Zionism selling for?
I think it was like 18 or 19.
Yeah, that, yeah. So, you know, and it's just a paperback, you know. So it's a little bit disconcerting. All right, just want to just hold this a minute. I'm going to turn this on a minute here. Yeah. Speaking about relative need, I do wonder why nobody ever questions these other nations, why they exist. I mean, what are we talking about here? You mean we're not to question Libya's existence, Algeria's existence, Yugoslavia shouldn't be questioned, or it is questioned, but I mean, there's hundreds of nations. They just have a right to just have a nice peaceful time of it, and no one worries about their right to where they are. You know, and it's only this one particular nation that gets questioned like this. It seems to me tragically unfair. No one questions Iran's right to exist where it exists, or Turkey, or Jordan, or Syria, or Lebanon. Well, why not? How come they're not? Egypt, that's fine, they can exist, and no one, oh yeah, you're an Egyptian, that's fine. You can exist. You have a right to be an Egyptian. Anyway, so this is something I think we'll get in the Zionist literature, not expressed the way I express it, but I often wonder, you know, I read the newspapers, I see the television broadcasts, and I just sort of reel, and I wonder, what are you talking about? I mean, are you serious? You mean all these other peoples have a right to exist? They've contributed to the world in some magnificent manner, that they should exist and not ever be questioned? You mean to say Bhutan, Kazakhstan, Paraguay, they should exist and no one, that's fine. But Israel shouldn't exist? Is that what you're trying to say? You know? Yes, I think 3/4 of the world is trying to say that again, unfortunately. I really do. So I do think the Zionist thought is important, not only for Jews, but even more for non-Jews and even for Jews, because I don't think Jews know anything about it, frankly. I talk to Jewish people, including my own children. I wouldn't be able to get and you guys are listening to this is the truth. I wouldn't be able to get a really serious intellectual answer from